Andrew Urquhart with you on the program today. You know, we are so blessed here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, especially when it comes to the freedoms that we have. One of the toughest places in the world to be a Christian, certainly in terms of the African continent, is Nigeria. Parts of the country, there is a Christian majority. Other parts, there is a Islamic majority, and then there's the conflict between the two sides. An organisation that has been working with the people of Nigeria for many years is Barnabas Aid. Richard Drury from Barnabas Aid joins us on the program. Richard, kia ora, good morning. Thanks for your time today.
Good morning to you, and Happy New Year, if that's not too late
to
us.
So it's still January, Richard, plenty of time for that. A difficult new year, in fact, things continuing to be difficult for the people of Nigeria. Can you explain to us exactly what some of the background is to the current conflict and what the current situation is?
Well, we've been following and working with Christians in Nigeria for many years. It's a country that's literally sort of divided geographically by religious affiliations. Generally speaking, the northern part is more Islamic, and the southern part much more Christian, historically. And we have a long-term conflict occurring in that burgeoning country. It's a very young population, and it's tipped to be possibly the third most populated country, which is hard to believe for such a small geographical area. So it's a very, very large country, and it has conflict, a history of conflict, which seems to be intensifying geographically, religiously, economically possibly as well.
Yeah. Now, I remember a few years back there was attacks on Christian schools in particular. There was a large amount of girls kidnapped from a Christian school. That certainly hit the headlines, and that has been continuing. With recent developments, though, I understand things have been getting, much worse just for the average Christian in Nigeria. What's some of the triggers? What's some of the tipping points, do you think, Richard?
Well, one of the triggers is actually the time of year. And it might be good just to pause to think of it Christmas Eve when we were enjoying Christmas. 295 Christians across about 25 villages and were killed, were slaughtered. Possibly about 30,000 people injured and displaced. And that, if you like, is a kind of epicenter, a flashpoint for the time of year, which has been going on over the whole of the last year. If I could just pause to say that for the listeners and viewers, about 45,000 Christians have been killed from 2009. The Democratic Republic of Congo, 2014, 5,500 there, and 1.8 thousand in Mozambique. So in particular, Nigeria has a history and a recent intensified history of flashpoints across the year, but in particular, those Christian festivals, if you like, almost ignite a kind of reaction.
Now, I understand there's a number of groups, no other way of describing them as Islamic extremist groups. The Fulani herdsmen as a group. There's other groups as well in Nigeria attacking small villages, mostly at night, and then disappearing back into the darkness. Is this the continued pattern for Nigeria?
It is a continued pattern, and it's almost on a weekly basis. Yeah, the kind of Islamic jihadist. The Fulani tribes is a historic and a long-term tribal dispute, which is both political, economic, but also religious too. But in recent years, particularly in that central section of Africa and that central section of Nigeria, it's a little bit of a microcosm of the whole continent, actually, of real conflicts whereby Christians are either asked to return or to turn to the Islamic faith, or to be displaced, or to suffer the consequences of staying. And I guess it's hard for us to imagine that, a typical church service might end up with your pastor being kidnapped and your village being pillaged and burnt down, your church burnt down, and people fleeing. And of course, those who are left behind, usually it's women, elderly folk, and children. They can't run. So they are often the victims of that. And sad to say, that is the direct result of a kind of Islamic jihadist extreme groups.
What's been the political response from the Nigerian government? I know there's it depends on the government, depends on whether or not the government is led by Christian or Muslim groups. That does have an influence on just how strong the government response is. But has there been a government response? Are the Nigerian military, for example, trying to stamp out these atrocities?
It's been sporadic, and mainly from the Christian point of view. There is a new president who is Muslim, which is unusual, and they usually share the presidency and various points between Christian and Muslims. I don't think that is particularly significant. I think it's just simply the ability to respond with the resources that they have. But from the Christians' point of view, there have been various Christian bodies, again, appealing to their authorities, saying, please, can you just look at this again? Can you please send resources? And the response has been sporadic to minimal. It's just sad to say, but that's possibly because of lack of resources. It could be argued that it's possible because it's Christians, but I don't think that is the major factor. I just think it's a lack of resources at this stage.
Of course,
the Christian voice, of course, is often ignored in many countries, and that could be a factor too.
I think given what is happening in Nigeria, though people of all faiths and none should be appalled, it is a little bit of a case perhaps of out of sight, out of mind. I mean, there's many terrible things happening in the world at the moment. Some tend to be dominating the headlines, and not for no reason. However, thank you so much for the work that you do at Barnabas Aid in drawing attention to this, of saying, hey, actually, this is an important issue that needs addressing, not just by the Nigerian government, but by governments generally. I understand, look, it's easy to look at this situation and go, gosh, isn't that awful? But actually, there's something we here in New Zealand can do about it. We can use our influence and a bit of pressure to improve the situation for Christians in Nigeria.
We can do all sorts of things. I mean, the normal thing I think is to redouble our attempts to find out and to pray and to have concern for the Christian family. I think that's incumbent upon us all the time. But specifically, Barnabas are organising through our magazine and websites a petition to end the genocide of African Christians. And people can go online, the website, which I can give later. They can sign physically through the magazines that are distributed, passed around the church, sent back to us. And we have in mind, as we advocated a few years ago, to get as many signatures as possible. It would be really great to get, I'm going to say 52,300 signatures. I'll tell you why, because that's the number of those figures that I've just given you of African Christians who have been who have given their lives really for following Jesus. So anything of that order for New Zealand will be fabulous, and it means clicking onto our website, signing electronically, or distributing a form from our latest magazine across the churches and getting that back to us. And what we're hoping to do, of course, is to get that, as we did before, is get that before the Commonwealth countries as a matter to be discussed in October 2024. Again, profile is really important, and it does matter. It does matter. That signature, that 6 second time taken to put your name behind your Christian family can make a difference.
So important. And that story you told beforehand about, hey, whilst we were having our Christmas Day meal, there were Nigerian Christians who were slaughtered in their homes. if there's something we can do about it, we certainly should, whether that be by staying informed through organisations such as Barnabas Aid, certainly for praying for the people in Nigeria, but also taking that step, 6 seconds to sign a form. Let's represent brothers and sisters in Christ in another part of the world. Richard, thank you so much for the work that you do. If people wanted to find out more, connect to your mailing list, sign the petition, what's the web address? How do they connect?
It's Barnabas Aid, so that's Barnabas with an A before the S,
Yep.
barnabasaid.org/NZ, and that will lead you to many avenues of information, and particularly the End the Genocide of African Christians petition.
Barnabas Aid /NZ. Richard, kia ora, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for yours.